If you embrace business guidance, it means that you've hopefully gained instant access to strategies and procedures intended to help you minimize stumbles in entrepreneurship and maximize both your earning and personal potential. It signifies a willingness on your part that you're open to learning, growing, and prospering, and it's an admission that you don't have all the answers and you're willing to accept constructive criticism for the good of the business and your personal growth. Well, according to my friends over at Forbes and a recent workplace happiness survey published in October of this year, it found that 9 in 10 employees with a career mentor felt happier at work. Furthermore, those with career mentors are more likely to report that they have been well compensated and their contributions are valued when organizations look to grow, develop, and prosper and elevate their standing within the business community. It also helps to contribute to their overall job satisfaction rate if they're asked to evaluate the performance of their employer on an annual basis. All of this is good news for my friend Tom Conlon, who runs a creative marketing and branding agency known as North Street. They are in the business of making first and lasting impressions, which they do from the creation of impactful branding identities, websites, and content campaigns. Conlon says that success in business is all about creating impactful mentor relationships where both parties have a chance to win in the game of business and life. And Conlon joined me this week to have an in-depth conversation all about the power of business messaging, marketing, branding, life, and so much more. It was an energetic and thought-provoking conversation which I am glad to share with all of you right now. So without further delay, I'm Kevin McShane. Let's have this conversation. If you're ready, Tom, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my friend, and I'm super excited to dive into how you view the creative process, my friend. Great to see you, and thank you for a few minutes, my friend.
Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Tom, I wanted to start by asking you, what do you think it means to have a successful entrepreneurial journey? Because I know you've been in the field of entrepreneurship for over a decade now. So when I say a successful entrepreneurial journey, I'm curious, what comes to mind for you?
I think it's always learning. Honestly, I think as an entrepreneur, you definitely start your business not knowing everything. In fact, you probably know very little about starting a business. And every day is a learning experience, whether it's how to do what you do, your actual service or product. For us, that's design and branding, to how to run a company financially successful, right? How to know what you're spending, know what you're making, know what your profit is, etc. How to hire the right people, and once you have the right people hired, how to make sure that they're happy and productive and efficient. Learning how to deal with clients. Some clients can be more difficult than others, and sometimes that's just because they need a coach on our end, like a project manager, to help them get organized and everything. And so I don't know, you just kind of, being an entrepreneur to me is one, taking that initial leap, and then two, understanding that it's going to be a learning process until the very end.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I know that you run a company called North Street, and it all helps people sort of find their creative energy from a marketing and branding standpoint. So tell me all about North Street, my friend.
Yeah, so we're a branding and design agency. I started it 13 years ago. So what we do is we help companies and organizations with things like naming. We can name organizations. We can create their look and feel. So, that's their logo and their colors and their typography and all of that. We call that visual identity. Then there's something we call verbal identity or messaging. That's really like how an organization talks about itself, how it talks about what it does, how it talks to its different audiences. And then as part of that, we do a lot of website design and development, because, websites are really the biggest marketing asset that our clients at least have. And so once we're done with all of that work I just mentioned, putting that all together on a website usually is the sort of like climax moment of our engagement with clients. We're fairly specialized in the business to business arena. So we work with financial services companies, professional services companies like law firms and accountants, nonprofits, and healthcare. So what we don't do is, we don't create new energy drink brands or sneakers or clothing or anything like that. We don't do the consumer stuff. We're more on the business and services side.
Absolutely. And Tom, what do you think is the key to creating great business messaging? What do you think the key is there?
The key really there is a few things. I think a lot of times, I think a lot of times clients get, or, let's just say organizations, people get really hung up in talking immediately about who they are and what they do. And I think the piece that they're forgetting is, who are they doing it for, and why and why, and then the other part of that is, why does it matter? So I think when you're putting together your brand messaging or your verbal identity, you don't think about yourself first. You think about the different people that you're servicing, whether that's probably your clients, but it's also going to be potential employees and talent. It might be things like members of the media. So you need to really think about the different audience members and what do they want? What keeps them up at night? That your firm or you as an individual contributor are qualified and experienced in helping them with. So I think, I see a lot of websites where it's like, we do this, we do that. And it's like, well, okay, but can you help me as the person that's coming and visiting your website or engaging your brand? Because these are the 5 things that keep me up at night, and I need help, and I'm going to look for help on the internet. And, am I going to find you because your messaging is fine-tuned to me and my needs? Or is it so generic that I'm never going to find you? Or even if I do find you, it doesn't really speak to me.
Yeah, and, Tom, I'm fascinated to ask you, how do you think the term value proposition applies to both business and in life? How do you think those are interconnected?
Business and life. All right. Well, a value proposition in business is kind of what I just talked about, which is okay, well, what is it that you do that is going to make a difference in my business, right? So for us, a lot of times that's, let's say a financial services firm is launching another fund and they need, they want to promote that fund and get people subscribed or invested in it. Or it's a healthcare it's a healthcare company looking to raise money or expand their audience. So the value proposition for a business is really like, what are you going to do for me to address my needs? And then of course, like you talk about ROI or return on investment, like is it going to be worth the cost? A value proposition in life, I'd say, is really it's different. I mean, it's like what do you stand for as a person? Like what are you gonna do in this life that makes a difference? And it doesn't need to be a really big, profound difference. If it is, great, but I just think like what are you contributing? What are you contributing to the world at large is how I would define a value prop for an individual.
Yeah, and Tom, I know one of the big missions you have from a personal and business standpoint is the idea of business mentoring. So tell me, why do you think business mentoring is so important?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, it really goes back to what I said before with the initial question, which is like you don't know, you as an entrepreneur, you don't know everything, and you are learning literally day to day. And the further you are in your trajectory as an entrepreneur, there are hundreds of thousands of people on that same trajectory, but ahead of you on that same kind of curve or that same kind of that same sort of path, right? And you yourself are also ahead of other folks on a similar path. So I can just tell you that like throughout my career, I've had several mentors, informal and formal, that have just gone through, they've run the traps before, right? They know where the landmines are. They know sort of how to negotiate the gauntlet of the things that I'm about to face, right? And so it's been invaluable for me to just have other people who are more established in their businesses to be able to say, hey, Tom, I've gone through this before. This is how I dealt with it. Or yes, I've had an employee do that before, and this is how I handled it. And hey, if you're in a financial kind of quagmire, this is how I've done it before. And so I've learned so many things over the years through these, again, formal and informal mentorship relationships. And me, where I'm at, I'm also, I mean, I'm 13 years into running a creative agency. So I really love to speak to people who are on the sort of front end of that, whether that's people in college looking for their first job, or sort of just owners of smaller agencies than mine that are kind of just starting out and don't know like, what to do or how to handle certain problems. And so, yeah, business mentorship is invaluable. I do it as much as I can, and I seek it out as much as I can.
Yeah, and Tom, I know that your business has grown over the years, but if I asked you to go back to what your sweet spot is in business, and I told you you could only do one thing for the rest of your business career, how do you think you would go back to your roots to give you the biggest smile professionally?
Yeah, so that's a good question because I as the head of a creative agency, I started this agency as a designer and a developer. So I was the one that was designing websites, designing logos, and then building the websites. Now I don't do that anymore. I don't design websites myself. I don't code them. My computer doesn't even have a local server environment on it, which every developer has, and I used to. And so if I had to strip everything away and focus on one thing, I'm not sure I would really change where I am, because what I do now is when I was a designer and a developer, I could spend 8 hours a day in the dark in front of a computer and not talk to a single person and get a lot of work done. I loved doing that, but what I do now is I sort of work in the world of people. So I'm responsible for sales and marketing at North Street. So that means going out and getting new clients. And so my job is really just meeting people, staying in touch with people, connecting with people. And that can be potential clients, that can be potential employees, that can just be, again, like those sort of mentor-mentee relationships. And so, I don't know if I were to do it all again, I might plant myself there earlier than I did in my, in the way I did it. I ended up spending lots of years as an active designer and developer and then a project manager. But I think I've really grown into my skills, and also just like that I like just interfacing with people all day.
Yeah, relationships in business. It's all about people connecting with people. So, I believe that networking, Tom, is the heartbeat of life, no matter whether you're in business or just personally. So, tell me about why do you think networking is the heartbeat of business? Why do you think that is the case, my friend?
Because to your point, relationships are everything, or relationships are what make the world go round. And so there's millions of people, millions of businesses. And in order for a person to connect with a business, or to connect with your business, they need to know about you. They also need to trust you. And that's really where networking comes in. I think that, networking is all about establishing personal relationships with people, getting to know them, understanding kind of just them as a person, so that when someone later on thinks, hey, I need a logo, or I need a website, or I need branding of some kind, they're like, oh, Tom Conlon, he's this awesome guy I met recently at whatever, and we've stayed in touch, and he's always posting things to LinkedIn, et cetera. And so it's really, networking is, again, it's just about establishing personal relationships with someone so that they think of you in a business context, and they're happy to put forward your name because they trust you and they like you.
Yeah, and Tom, part of that is creating a great culture. I know, Tom, you've listened to my podcast, and you know that I was born with cerebral palsy. So one of my passions in life is helping businesses create a more inclusive culture for folks with disabilities. So how do you think we can make business more inclusive, to include folks with disabilities and create an overall great company or organizational culture? What do you think is the key there?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of, well, listen, I went through a year ago or so, I went through a diversity, equity, and inclusion program through Design Rhode Island. And what I learned is I think there's a lot of unintentional, I guess, prejudices that people have that they're not intending to really put out there in the world, but as a result of not really thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they're limiting the scope of who they're looking for to bring into their organization. And so what do I mean by that? I mean that here's a good example. So my agency, when we used to post job listings, we would post at the very end, we would say, hey, to prove that you've read this whole thing and that you haven't just, glossed over it and then sent in your resume, please send us in the email subject a reference to Star Wars. And so what we would do is anybody that did not include a reference to Star Wars, we just didn't even look at their resume, because it was like, well, they don't pay attention. But what I realized is that by asking a question like that, by asking for a Star Wars specific reference, we really are sort of limiting our scope to, I don't know, like nerds who like sci-fi, right? And that is a very, very sort of like limited audience to the number of people that are out there that could very, very handily fill a position at North Street. So I know that's a small example, but that was like an eye opener for me, which was like, oh, even the questions that we're asking in our initial kind of job posting are almost like slanted a little bit towards getting one specific type of person in here versus as many as we can. So I think the answer to me is everyone needs to look at their own prejudices. And I don't want to say prejudice like like that it's an intentional, like it's a very intentional, very bad thing filled with malice. It's just more like, hey, you don't know that like you know, your worldview is not the only one. The people that you're surrounded by, not everyone is like that. And so you really have to kind of open your eyes and just open your sort of open yourself up to new ways of thinking. I mean, if we really want to go down the rabbit hole, we can talk about like what is good design. I mean, what is good design and who defines it, right? Is good design defined by a bunch of, you know, white creative directors that have been, you know, in their positions for the last 30 years? You know, is that what is our idea of good design based on a very small group's definition of good design? So I think that, like, you know, once you start asking questions like that, you really start to peel back kind of like your own thinking about what diversity, equity, and inclusion is, and what that means for the work that you do, but also the people that you have in your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Tom, you mentioned earlier you started your career as a website designer and writer and developer. So I'm curious if you could go back to the beginning of your career and apply a lesson that you've learned so far in business. How do you think you've grown the most as an entrepreneur?
I think the thing that I've learned is delegation. I think delegation is very, very important, and it's very hard for entrepreneurs to do. Some people call it letting go of the vine, which is a term from something called the entrepreneurial operating system. But I think as an entrepreneur starting out, you do everything, right? So when I started my business, I was the designer, I was the developer, I was doing the billing, I was paying employees, I was sending out invoices. I wasn't really doing any marketing, although I should have been doing it. You're doing everything yourself, and it's very hard to kind of let go and bring other people in that you trust and that you can teach, but you don't want them, but not micromanage them in a way that like they are just robots doing everything that you tell them to do. And so I would just say that for any sort of entrepreneur starting out, I would identify the things that you aren't the best at. Well, it's a matrix. It's like, what are the things that you're really good at and love doing? What are the things that you are good at and like doing? What are the things that you're good at and don't really like doing? And what are the things that you are not good at and don't like doing? And I would take those two bottom parts of the matrix and try to delegate those to someone as soon as possible. So for me, the first one was finances. I was like, I don't know. I would look at spreadsheets and my eyes would gloss over. I would look at a P&L and I would be like, I don't even know what this means. So I had to delegate that right away. The hardest thing to delegate for me was project management. So I remember hiring that role for the first time in 2015. And it was such a hard decision for me to make. It was like, man, am I really going to trust somebody else to like run the trains here and be the client facing person? Like that is so scary. And doing that was one of the best things I ever did, because the person I hired was really talented at it, but it also freed me up to focus on the things that I really wanted to focus on in my business.
Yeah, and you know, Tom, the next thing I want to talk to you about is the idea of social responsibility and entrepreneurship. And I'll qualify the question this way. I'm curious to get your thoughts on whether you think small business owners or entrepreneurs have a social responsibility to create more equitable opportunities for everyone, because you know small business is the backbone of any economy. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on whether you think there's any correlation between social responsibility and building and growing a business.
I think it's increasingly important for organizations to have something that they stand for, right? Not every company does, and not every company has to, but the fact is this younger generation of folks entering the workforce, younger millennials and Gen Z, have clearly put up their hand and said that like listen, social issues are extremely important to us, and the brands that we're going to buy from, it's important for us that they have some sort of social mission or something that they stand for. And so I really think, I mean, you look at every ad on TV, avocado mattress. I saw one just a second ago. Avocado mattress, whatever. Every proceeds from every mattress go to some organization 1% better for the planet, or something like that. And Warby Parker, one pair of glasses you buy someone else one in an impoverished country. I think Tom's and Bombas socks are the same, right? It's becoming increasingly important just for getting this younger audience to believe in your brand, but also to work for you. I mean, that's another thing too, is that young people coming out of college, they're not just really satisfied anymore with just, oh, this is just a paycheck and I'm just going to go to this job and I'm going to do what I have to do and I'm going to get my paycheck and I'm going to live my life completely separately from that. I think, younger folks are just, they're more integrated when it comes to work and life. And so I think that their work needs to have something that they believe in.
Absolutely.
And I'll just say, Kevin, I think that you're right that small businesses are the front lines of that, because although they are less financially equipped to do things like give away a free pair of glasses for every pair of glasses they sell, there are a multiple more, exponential multiple more small businesses than large ones. And so, you put that all together and a real difference can be made.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tom, since you run a creative agency, this is probably going to be in your wheelhouse, my friend. But tell me about your thoughts on the importance of valuing creativity in business. How important do you think that is?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think there are some businesses that will, that the bottom line, the bottom line, the profit is all that matters, at the expense of culture and at the expense of their brand. Who really cares if at the end of the day you're making money hand over fist? But I think, and maybe it's just me because I'm a visual person and I used to be a designer, but listen, there's a real difference to me between the organizations that invest in branding and the ones they don't. Because what they've said is, if we care about branding, they've raised their hands and say, hey, look, connecting with our audience is really important to us. We want to make sure that people understand who we are, what we do it for, and why it matters. And we're going to go out there and we're going to figure that out. And then we're going to show it to the world. Now, it's not just altruistic like that. I mean, I actually think that, maybe you have some thoughts on this too, but I think that there is a subliminal connection that every human being makes between the quality of a brand and the quality of that brand's products or services, right? So if you showed up to the Nike website and it looked like Phil Knight had made it by himself in his basement, you wouldn't want to spend $200+ for a pair of shoes, because you'd be like, if he hasn't taken the time to invest in his brand, then I don't think his sneakers are going to be very good either. And so for us, that translates to financial services firms, law firms. It's like, or SaaS products. Like, if you haven't really paid attention to your own brand and invested in it, then like, what are you focused on? And is your product really that good?
Yeah, just to ask you a question, I'll answer it by asking you my next question. Tom, I'm a big believer in creating a competitive advantage in life. And when I talk to organizations, I tell them that living with a disability is my competitive advantage, because I can view the world from a different perspective than other people living with a disability. Tom, at the age of 9, buddy, I was told that I wouldn't walk because of the severity of my cerebral palsy, so I use a walker and a wheelchair to get around. But I think by investing in a brand, it also means that you're investing in your competitive advantage. So let me ask you, what do you think it means to create a competitive advantage in business?
Creating a competitive advantage is really the white whale of competitive advantage is to do something that no one else does, and that's really hard to do, right? It's like there's only a few firms in the world, or a few products in the world that are so specific that they do one thing they do one thing and they have no competitors. So that's the best competitive advantage you can possibly have. Failing that, you need to differentiate yourself, right? Like, what is it about you? If I've got, for me, I run a design agency. There's no shortage of design agencies in the world, right? And so what's our competitive advantage? I mean, our competitive advantage, I like to say, it's a couple things. I think one is that we're a branding agency that started as a website design and development agency. We're a full branding agency now, but we made that evolution over many years. And so our competitive advantage to me is that we're a branding agency that designs and builds really, really high tech, technical, well-built websites. But we're also, so we're a branding agency that can do web, but we're also a web design agency that, because we're a branding agency, I think that we really elevate the visuals of a website. We're not just focused on button color and the placement of the nav menu. That's all important. Of course, that's UX design, but we really take that extra we just have that extra level of thinking that's gonna really sort of elevate the brand, even if we're just working on the website. So yeah, so competitive advantage, figure out what yours is, right? It's not going to be that you're the only person who does this one thing, but what are the ways that you are different? And I think if you can put together 2 or 3 things that you do, the combination of those that you do uniquely, the combination of those 3 things is your competitive advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, for this next question, I'll use myself as an example. So I have a website that markets me as a podcasting host and a motivational speaker. And, one thing when you go to my website, and I say that I work with organizations to help them build a more inclusive culture. That's my positioning statement if you visit me on LinkedIn or on my website. So I'm curious, when you're creating a website, what are the principles of success to make sure that you really get people on your website and really build up that traffic? What's the key to building a great website that is sustainable over time?
Yeah, good question. First, they need to find you. So there's some baseline search engine strategy that needs to be done, right? Because if you just put up a website and then just don't think about it, the people need to find you, right? And so that's doing things like just doing a keyword strategy search, seeing where you rank, where other people rank, where there are opportunities for you to rank higher than you do, or rank places where your competitors aren't really paying attention to. The other piece is, and I would say like paid search kind of goes hand in hand with that a bit. It's like once you're doing the research into SEO, organic SEO, then you can build a paid campaign on top of that too. But the big thing really is, okay, well, you can spend all this money on SEO and paid search, but what happens once they're on your website, right? Once they're on your website, it's the website's job to do to engage them and ultimately convert them. And so convert is just, your definition of whatever you want them to do on the website. So for you, Kevin, it's probably get in touch about a speaking opportunity or something like that. Now, I think the best websites, and I say this to all of our clients, I think the best websites do two things. Because people view websites or consume websites in different ways. I think that it needs to have it needs to have something for the audience that doesn't know exactly what they're looking for. And so that's sort of like, that's creating a narrative through your website. It's telling a story and making sure that when they get to the bottom of this page, they go to the next page that you want them to, and so on, so that they can navigate your website and get your story and get the story of who you are and what you do. That's sort of like the narrative side of it. The other side is that I think it also needs to be a resource, meaning that if you have lots of podcasts or white papers or videos or other resources on your website, blog posts, etc., they should be easy to find, right? I should be able to get onto your website and find what I'm looking for very quickly. So I'm that in that latter half, that's the audience who knows what they're looking for. Oh, I'm looking for Kevin's podcast on XYZ. Like, I should be able to find that pretty quickly. But if I land on your website and I don't know who you are and I don't know what I'm looking for, I should have just as good of an experience learning about who you are and why I might be interested in working with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I've got a trio of questions left for you. And the first one has to do with, if I gave you $1 million to create a commercial outlining your top three principles of sustainable success in business, what sort of a message would you want to deliver through the commercial?
Well, as a creative agency, I would probably take most of that $1 million and invest it back in the agency and spend about 1/10 of that on the advertisement, just to sort of just to maximize profit and efficiency. But if I'm making the ad, what you're asking, I think I would make an ad about people. I think it's like, I think people respond. This is a big thing on in website design that we tell our clients all the time. I mean, a big piece of what appeals to folks on websites is the human beings they see on it. And I don't really mean stock photography. I mean more like the people who work at your company. Are they real? Are they real people? Do you look like a nice guy that I would want to have a conversation with or talk with? And so, and that also goes for potential talent, right? If you're hiring, people want to show up at your website and say like, oh, these people look really nice and professional and fun, and I want to work here. And so if I were to have an advertising budget for North Street, I don't have the words right now because I'd have to do some thinking about what our messaging on that would be, but it would be focused on people. It would be focused on the people that work for North Street and that we want to work for North Street, as well as the people we want to work with in terms of clients, and then the people whose lives our clients affect.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I'm a big believer in the power of allyship and really giving opportunities to groups that we may not work with on a regular basis, but using allyship is an advantage in business. So how do you think we can use the idea of allyship and hope to create success in entrepreneurship?
So when you say allyship, I kind of think, this is what I think of, and tell me if, I've misunderstood the question. But for us, we're a branding and design agency. So there are some things that we do really well, but there are lots of things in the marketing space that we don't do. I don't do paid advertising. I don't do media buying. I don't do public relations. I don't do sort of general marketing. But I have really good relationships with other agencies that do. And again, it sort of goes back to that networking piece a bit. These are folks I've met over the course of years and I've developed personal relationships with. I trust them I like them as people. I trust them. I like their work product. I like their process, and I like working with them. And so, I proudly say North Street's not a jack of all trades, master of none. We're not that agency that can do all things for all people. We're very good at the things that we do, but we also are happy to admit that we're not good at the things that we don't do. And so that's when I bring in allies. That's when I bring in other agencies that I know and trust to do work for my clients that I don't do. And my client is my client doesn't care that it's another company that's doing it. They're just happy that I've given them the sort of I've given them the thumbs up, the go ahead, and said, I trust these people. They do great work. So let's work together. Now, the flip side of that is that I also get work from other agencies, right? These other agencies that I'm partners with, a PR agency doesn't necessarily do branding, but when they take on a new client and they're about to launch a new campaign, they might say, "Ooh, wow, this brand really, before we can even do our work, this brand needs to be revamped or this website needs to be revamped." And so it's a two-way street. And so we go back to that networking conversation, it's not just networking individual to individual. I network with other businesses, and as a result, we bring them in as allies on projects, and they bring us in.
Yeah, absolutely. The conversation of progress never stops, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Tom, my final question is how I end all of my podcasts, my friend. And I want to know all about you and your individual and personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
Yeah. So, listen, it's funny. My father was an electrician. He was an electrical contractor, and he ran his own business. He worked for some companies for a little while, but he ultimately ended up running his own business for years and years. And it wasn't until he died 6 or 7 years ago. It wasn't until sort of close to the end that I really started to connect with him on this entrepreneurial level where, my brother and sister have jobs with bosses. And so it's just different. And my dad and I had this sort of special thing that was like, it's like, even though he ran an electrical business and I run a creative agency, the headaches with clients, payroll, employees, it's universal to all business owners. And so my father and I really, really connected on that. I like, and let's just go back to that mentorship conversation. I love mentorship. I, of course, like I said, I seek it out as much as I can, but I also really love to provide it because, everybody in the world is just a few steps ahead in their sort of like in their chronology, right? It's like, I started an agency 13 years ago. There's a friend of mine who started it 5 years before that. There's a friend of mine who started it 5 years after. And so I guess it's giving back, but it's really just sharing. It's like, look, I've already gone through all this stuff. And so I want to help you. I want to help you like avoid easy mistakes or, avoid really horrible situations like bankruptcy or something like that. So I think that if we're talking about legacy, it would just be that, I as an entrepreneur, I gave back to the entrepreneurial community.
Yeah, absolutely. Life is all about paying it forward, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's karma. It's karma, right? It's like, I'm not doing it for a paycheck. I'm doing it because it's the right thing to do. And hey, maybe somebody will do me a favor someday.
And then it's like springing more business on yourself by paying it forward, right? There's value in business to being kind, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right?
Oh, absolutely, right? People, one of our core values, we don't work with people that aren't kind. We just don't. It's not worth it.
Well, you only have one life to live, and if we can keep our networking blood pressure down, that's always a good thing, isn't it?
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tom, tell me if people want to get connected with yourself personally or North Street, my friend, what's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, so check us out on our website's northstreetcreative.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, I think just as Tom Conlon. I think I snatched that real early. Let me see. Am I Tom Conlon or Thomas Conlon? I think Thomas. I'm Thomas. So Thomas-Conlon. If you look that up on LinkedIn, that's me. Would love to connect with anyone who's listening. And especially someone who's looking for mentorship. I'm into it.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. Well, I have to tell you, I love, as you know, engaging in conversations about a variety of different things, and I certainly enjoyed and was delighted to engage in conversation with you all about business optimization, being creative in business, and so much more, my friend. I want to thank you for engaging in conversation with me and for being here this morning. It's most appreciated.
Yeah, this was great, Kevin. Thanks a lot for having me on. I really enjoyed the chat, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch.